of your screen is what we call the worksheet. It is composed of columns, which are lettered A, B, C, D, etc., and rows, which are numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. The Excel worksheet is tremendously large. There are 256 possible columns. Now, if I wanted to move to the right, I can go to the bottom of the screen, and this area right here is referred to as the horizontal scroll bar. If I begin to click the right arrow, you'll notice how the top of the screen changes, and we're seeing additional column letters. And this could go on for quite a while because we have 256 columns. But I do want to point out right now the lettering scheme. We see that columns are lettered from left to right, A through Z, and then the lettering scheme becomes AA, AB, AC, etc., all the way out to column IV. That's the rightmost column. A quick way to get there, if you wanted to, would be to hit the keystroke combination Control right arrow. And you'll see column IV. And to get back to the extreme left-hand side, we could hit Control left arrow. And when I say left arrow, I mean the 4 arrow keys on your keyboard located in their own inverted T on a keypad to the right of the main keyboard. The number of rows here is even more enormous. And if I'll simply hit Control down arrow, you'll see what the last row number is. 65,536. This is considerably more than in previous versions of Excel. And if you have a large database, Excel now gives you the capacity to handle an even larger one. And I'm going to hit Control up arrow to return us to the upper left-hand corner. At any given time on your worksheet, if you're about to enter data, for example, in this column, which is D, and in this row, which is 6, if you were to click here with the mouse, or if you were to use arrow keys, using the arrow keys on the keyboard, you'll notice at any given time there is a thick border around at least one cell. This is referred to as the active cell. And do notice that at any point, the active cell is additionally identified by the fact that the column indicator appears to be a button that's extended, so the G here stands out compared with the other columns. And the row number on the left-hand side also appears to be punched out, you might say, or pulled out, has that three-dimensional look. Also, at any given time, the exact location of the active cell is identified in the upper left-hand corner in what we call the name box. This particular location is referred to as G11. Now, many times when you enter data in a worksheet, you're not really concerned with the exact address. You put in information to suit your needs. You line up information the way it looks, the way you want it to look. But when it comes time to enter formulas, you sometimes do need to refer to the information in other cells by the location of that cell. That's referred to as the cell address. And every location on this particular worksheet, or any worksheet, has a unique identifier that's called the cell address, always identified by the column letters and the row numbers in combination. At the bottom of the screen, we see the names of other worksheets. In Excel, what you create is actually a workbook. A workbook is composed of worksheets. Now, many times in Excel, you create a workbook, which, by the way, is the same as a file. A workbook is a file. You create a workbook that has a single sheet in it. Even though you may see at the bottom of the screen an indicator that says Sheet 2, Sheet 3, possibly Sheet 4, Sheet 5. In fact, you can have up to 255 sheets. When you enter Excel, you will see a default setting. In this particular environment, the default setting for a workbook is 3 sheets. Now, it's quite possible that in your use of Excel, maybe you create only workbooks that have single sheets. Nothing wrong with that. If you do, in this case here, it's Sheet 2 and Sheet 3, and we can get to them by clicking on them. Sheet 2 and Sheet 3 might remain empty, and there's no concern there about it taking up additional space. As you become a more experienced Excel user, however, you may come to see the advantage and the need for having multi-sheet workbooks. A typical example might be a Sheet 1 could be a summary. Sheet 2 might contain information about quarter 1. Sheet 3 might contain information about quarter 2. And then you might have a sheet 4 and a sheet 5 taking care of the other quarters. Similarly, you might have 12 sheets, one for each month of information, and then a sheet 1 at the front that would contain a summary of everything below it. If, for example, sheet 1 contains information about the eastern region, you may want to change its name. If you double-click on sheet 1, you can then edit the entry. We'll just type in Eastern and then delete the other information. Sheet 1 has now been renamed Eastern. We could in a similar way rename sheet 2 into Central or Western as needed. It's easy also to insert additional sheets, and we will talk about that later. The right-hand side of this row contains what's called the horizontal scroll bar. We mentioned it briefly previously. If we have data in this worksheet, we do at different times want to move more to the right, and by clicking this arrow here to the right, we'll see how we see more of the screen off to the right. We see additional columns. And if we click the left arrow, we see more of the screen leftward. Similarly, along the right-hand side of the screen, we have a horizontal scroll bar, and we will be using this constantly throughout the course, and we'll talk more about it too. For the moment, if we click on the down arrow, we'll see how the number of rows, or the rows that we do see on the left-hand side, will change. We're moving down, and we can keep clicking on that indefinitely. Well, let's say until we reach 65,000 rows, which would take a long time. And we have an upper arrow here also. And as we get more data, we'll also show you how to use this. We can click and drag this also up and down to relocate the positioning of our screen. One word of caution here, when you do use these arrows for horizontal scrolling or vertical scrolling, you don't move the active cell. And what that means is if, for example, if you were to scroll rightward, if you type anything right now, the information goes in the active cell. And if you look in the upper left portion of our screen, even though we don't see it, the active cell is A1. So we'll talk about that a little more when we have data on the screen too. At different times, you may want this horizontal scroll bar to be smaller because you might have many sheet names. And if you notice, if you put the mouse between where the sheet names are located and the arrow, you can slide this separation more off to the right or left as needed. So if we had more sheet names, we'd be able to see more of them here also. At the very bottom of the screen, we see a status bar. And you keep your eye on this in much the same way as you might use the rearview mirror in your car. Typically, it would say ready in the lower left-hand corner. But if we start to type some data, we'll see how it says enter. And at different times, we'll see the word edit. And we'll see other words depending upon what we're doing in the particular worksheet. The right-hand side of the screen tells us a number of things. You'll see NUM, for example, right now. That means the numlock key is on. And if you don't wish to have numlock on, you can press the numlock key on your keyboard, and that will disappear. So it's a little indicator down there. At different times, do look at the bottom of the screen for messages. And I understand that if you have used other Windows software, you do develop that habit of looking at the bottom of your screen. Some of you, by the way, may also, in the Windows 95 environment, have the taskbar at the bottom of the screen. We're not showing that in this particular environment. So your screen may look slightly different in that respect also. Another screen difference that might occur is that the size of the toolbar, the buttons at the top of the screen, can be made larger or smaller. And it could be that in your display, maybe these tools end about this part of your screen. You probably see all the buttons, but it just ends sooner. And there are variations in screen display and screen resolution that anybody can adjust off the taskbar at the settings location. As you build your worksheet, you do want to be able to move